A struggling single-mom waitress kissed a billionaire to escape a dangerous situation. But that desperate kiss would change her entire life forever in ways she never imagined. Drop your city below and subscribe. Ready for an amazing story with a twist ending? Let's begin. The silver trays felt heavier tonight. Emily Carter adjusted her grip on the polished serving platter, her fingers aching from 6 straight hours of carrying champagne flutes and appetizers through the marble halls of La Étoile, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. At 26, she had grown accustomed to the weight, not just of the trays, but of her entire life pressing down on her shoulders like an invisible burden that never quite lifted. She paused near the kitchen entrance, stealing a moment to catch her breath. Through the ornate archway, she could see the dining room glittering with crystal chandeliers and candlelight, the soft murmur of wealthy patrons discussing deals worth more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. Women in designer gowns laughed at jokes she would never understand, their diamonds catching the light like tiny captured stars. Men in tailored suits gestured with hands that had never known calluses, never scrubbed floors at 3 in the morning, never counted pennies to make rent. "Emily, table 12 needs their wine." Marcus, the head server, appeared beside her with his perpetual expression of barely concealed impatience. He was a thin man in his 50s, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "And fix your hair. You look like you've been wrestling with the dishwasher again." "Sorry, Marcus." She tucked a loose strand of honey-brown hair behind her ear and straightened her black uniform. The fabric was slightly too tight across her shoulders. She had lost weight these past few months, stress eating away at her like acid, but she couldn't afford to buy new clothes when Lily needed winter boots and the heating bill was 3 months overdue. Lily. Just thinking her daughter's name sent a warm pulse through Emily's chest, a reminder of why she endured nights like this. Her little girl was 4 years old now, with curly brown hair and her father's green eyes, though Emily preferred not to think about him. Derek had vanished the moment he learned she was pregnant, leaving nothing behind but a few scattered memories and a court order for child support he had never once honored. Sometimes Emily wondered if Lily would ask about him someday, and the thought filled her with a complicated mixture of anger and sadness that she had learned to push deep down where it couldn't interfere with her work. She grabbed the wine bottle Marcus indicated and made her way through the dining room, weaving between tables with the practiced grace of someone who had spent years learning to be invisible. That was the trick to surviving in a place like this. Become part of the furniture, a silent shadow that appeared when needed and vanished when not. The wealthy patrons of La Étoile didn't want to see her, not really. They wanted their glasses filled and their plates cleared and their every whim anticipated, all without the inconvenience of acknowledging the human being providing these services. Table 12 was occupied by an elderly couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. Emily poured their wine with a genuine smile, momentarily touched by the way the old man held his wife's wrinkled hand, by the love that still sparkled in their eyes after half a century together. Would anyone ever look at her that way? She dismissed the thought as quickly as it came. Romance was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when every ounce of her energy went toward keeping Lily fed and clothed and loved. "Beautiful pour, dear," the old woman said, actually meeting Emily's eyes. "Thank you." "My pleasure," Emily replied, and meant it. These small moments of human connection were rare treasures in her work, brief reminders that not everyone viewed her as a replaceable cog in the restaurant's elaborate machinery. She was heading back toward the kitchen when she noticed him. He sat alone at table 7, the coveted corner spot with views of both the garden terrace and the main dining room. Most solo diners at La Étoile were business people reviewing documents or wealthy widowers drowning their loneliness in expensive wine. But this man was different. He sat perfectly still, his dark eyes surveying the room with an intensity that made Emily's skin prickle with awareness. He was handsome, devastatingly so, with sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and black hair swept back from his forehead. His suit was charcoal grey, obviously custom-made, and he wore it with the casual confidence of someone who had never questioned whether he belonged anywhere. But it wasn't his looks that caught Emily's attention. It was the way he watched. Most wealthy patrons looked through the staff as if they were ghosts. This man's gaze tracked every server, every movement, cataloguing information with an almost predatory focus. When his eyes met hers, Emily felt a jolt of electricity shoot through her body, so unexpected that she nearly stumbled. She looked away quickly, her cheeks flushing. What was wrong with her? She didn't have time for this, didn't have room in her life for mysterious strangers with intense eyes and perfectly tailored suits. She had tables to serve and tips to earn, and a daughter waiting at home with the neighbor who charged $15 an hour for babysitting. Emily! Marcus materialized again, his voice low and urgent. Mr. Castellano at table 7 needs attention. He specifically requested you. Me? She blinked in surprise. He doesn't even know my name. He asked for the waitress with the brown hair who looks like she's carrying the weight of the world. Marcus's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. I assume he meant you. Now go. He's one of our most important clients. Do not disappoint him. Emily's heart hammered as she approached table 7. Up close, the man was even more striking, his features arranged in an expression of polite interest that somehow managed to feel both welcoming and slightly dangerous. His eyes, she could see now that they were dark brown, almost black, followed her every step. "Good evening, sir," she said, impressed by how steady her voice sounded. "I'm Emily. How may I assist you tonight?" Emily. He repeated her name slowly, as if tasting it. His voice was deep and smooth, with a faint accent she couldn't quite place. "I'm Dominic Castellano. Please, there's no need for such formality. I was hoping you might help me with a small problem." "Of course, sir, Dominic." She corrected herself, feeling oddly off balance. "What do you need?" He leaned forward slightly, and she caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her think of autumn forests and leather-bound books. "I need you to do something that might seem strange. I need you to trust me, just for a moment." Before Emily could respond, she felt a hand close around her upper arm like a vice. She gasped, turning to find a man she recognized all too well standing beside her. Vincent Greco. She had served him before, always dreading the nights when he appeared. He was a regular at La Étoile, a man whose eyes lingered too long on the female staff, whose comments always carried an undertone of threat beneath their surface politeness. He was heavy-set, with slicked back hair and a gold watch that probably cost more than her annual salary, and his grip on her arm was painfully tight. "There you are, sweetheart," Vincent said, his smile not reaching his cold blue eyes. "I've been looking for you. We need to have a little conversation about that tip you shorted me last week." Emily's blood ran cold. She hadn't shorted him anything. She was meticulous about her work, but she knew better than to argue with men like Vincent. She had learned that lesson the hard way, through years of dealing with customers who believed their money entitled them to whatever they wanted. "Sir, I'm with another customer right now," she said carefully, trying to pull her arm free. His grip only tightened, and she knew there would be bruises tomorrow. "Perhaps we could discuss this later. Perhaps we could discuss this now." Vincent's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "In private. My car is outside. You and I are going to take a little drive, and you're going to learn what happens to people who steal from me." Terror seized Emily's chest. This wasn't about a tip. This was something else entirely, something predatory and dark that she had sensed lurking beneath Vincent's surface every time he looked at her. Her eyes darted around the room, But the other servers were busy with their tables, and Marcus was nowhere to be seen. She was alone, trapped in plain sight, and no one was going to help her. "The lady isn't going anywhere with you." The voice cut through Emily's panic like a blade through silk. Dominic Castellano had risen from his seat, and though his words were quiet, they carried an authority that made Vincent's grip falter momentarily. Up close, Dominic was taller than she had realized, at least 6'2", with broad shoulders and the lean build of someone who kept himself in peak physical condition. His dark eyes had transformed from warmly interested to absolutely lethal. Vincent laughed, but there was uncertainty beneath his bravado. "Mind your own business, friend. This is between me and the girl." "Actually, it's between me and my girlfriend." Dominic moved closer, placing himself partially between Emily and Vincent. "So I suggest you remove your hand from her arm before I remove it for you. Permanently." "Girlfriend?" Emily's mind raced to catch up. She opened her mouth to protest, to explain that she had never seen this man before tonight, but something in Dominic's expression stopped her. "Trust me," his eyes seemed to say, "just for a moment." Vincent's face reddened with anger. "Your girlfriend? Don't make me laugh. I've seen this one here for months. She's nobody's girlfriend. She's—" What happened next would replay in Emily's memory for years to come, each detail crystalline and surreal. Dominic's hand shot out and closed around Vincent's wrist with surgical precision, twisting just enough to make the larger man gasp and release Emily's arm. But that wasn't what silenced Vincent's protests. It was the kiss. Dominic's other hand cupped Emily's face with surprising gentleness, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was soft at first, almost questioning, giving her the chance to pull away. But Emily didn't pull away. Whether it was shock or desperation or something else entirely, she found herself melting into him, her hands clutching the lapels of his expensive suit as if he were a life raft in a storm. The world around them seemed to disappear. Emily forgot about Vincent, forgot about the restaurant, forgot about every worry and fear that had plagued her for years. All she could feel was the warmth of Dominic's lips, the strength of his arms as they wrapped around her waist. The way her heart was racing so fast, she thought it might burst from her chest. The kiss deepened, and she heard herself make a small sound of surprise and pleasure that would embarrass her later. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Vincent was staring at them with an expression of disbelief and barely contained rage. But something had shifted in his demeanor, a flicker of recognition in his eyes as he looked at Dominic, followed by what might have been fear. "Castellano," Vincent said slowly, as if the name had just registered. "Dominic Castellano. I didn't realize—" He swallowed hard. "I didn't know she was with you. My apologies. There won't be any trouble." He was backing away even as he spoke, his earlier aggression evaporating like morning mist. Within seconds, he had disappeared through the restaurant's front entrance, leaving Emily standing in Dominic's arms, with her lips still tingling from their kiss. "Are you all right?" Dominic's voice was gentle now, all trace of the dangerous edge gone. His hands had moved to her shoulders, steadying her as her legs threatened to give way. "I apologize for the dramatic intervention. I couldn't think of another way to convince him you weren't available." Emily stared up at him, her mind a whirlpool of confusion and lingering fear and something else, something warm and electric that she didn't want to examine too closely. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Why did he run like that? What just happened?" Dominic's lips curved into a smile that softened his severe features, making him look almost boyish, despite the sharp intelligence in his eyes. "Those are excellent questions. Perhaps you'll allow me to explain over dinner? I believe my table is still available." She should say no. Every instinct developed through years of single motherhood and struggling to survive told her that getting involved with powerful men only led to heartbreak. But her lips still burned from his kiss, and Vincent Greco was out there somewhere, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had actually protected her. "I'm working," she said weakly, even as she felt her resistance crumbling. "I'll speak with Marcus. Consider it a business meeting if you prefer." His dark eyes held hers, and she saw something there that looked almost like vulnerability. "Please, Emily. I find myself suddenly very invested in making sure you're safe." Emily thought of Lily waiting at home, of her tiny apartment with the peeling paint and the radiator that coughed like an old man every morning. She thought of Vincent's grip on her arm and the fear that had frozen her blood. And then she thought of the way Dominic had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, how his kiss had made her feel alive for the first time in years. "1 hour," she heard herself say, "and then I have to get back to work." Dominic's smile widened, and something in Emily's chest fluttered with an emotion she had long ago convinced herself she no longer possessed. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that this single hour would change everything. That the man before her was Dominic Castellano, billionaire CEO of Castellano Industries, one of the most powerful men on the eastern seaboard. That his presence at La Étoile tonight was not coincidence, and that their desperate kiss, born of danger and split-second decisions, had set in motion a chain of events that would transform her life in ways she never imagined. But that was a story still unfolding, and for now, Emily simply took his offered hand and allowed herself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, her luck was finally about to change. And before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more. Now let's see what happens next. The hour that followed was unlike anything Emily had experienced in her 26 years of life. Dominic guided her to his table with a hand resting gently on the small of her back, and she found herself hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. The warmth of his palm through the thin fabric of her uniform, the subtle pressure of his fingers, the way he pulled out her chair with an old-fashioned courtesy that made something flutter deep in her stomach. Marcus appeared almost instantly, his expression a complex mixture of surprise and calculation. Emily braced herself for a reprimand, for the cold reminder that servers did not sit with guests, that she was crossing lines that would cost her this job she so desperately needed. But Dominic spoke before Marcus could open his mouth. "Miss Carter will be joining me for dinner," he said, his tone polite but leaving no room for argument. "I trust this won't be a problem. I'll be adding a significant gratuity to cover any inconvenience to your staff scheduling." Marcus's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Mr. Castellano. I'll have someone cover her tables immediately. Is there anything else you require?" "Privacy, please, and a bottle of the 1998 Chateau Margaux." Dominic's smile was pleasant but dismissive. "That will be all for now." When Marcus retreated, Emily found herself studying the man across from her with a mixture of wariness and fascination. In the soft candlelight, his features seemed less severe, his dark eyes holding a warmth that hadn't been there during the confrontation with Vincent. He sat with the easy posture of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "You're staring," he observed, a hint of amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm trying to figure you out." Emily folded her hands in her lap to stop them from trembling. "People don't just do what you did. Not for strangers, not for waitresses. Perhaps I'm not most people." He leaned back in his chair, regarding her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "And you're not just a waitress, Emily. I could see that from the moment I walked in. The way you carry yourself, the way you noticed everything happening in the room while pretending not to. You're a survivor. I recognize the signs." Emily's throat tightened. "You don't know anything about me. I know that you're exhausted but refusing to show it. I know that your uniform is slightly too large, which suggests you've lost weight recently. Stress, probably. I know that you check your phone every few minutes when you think no one is watching, which means someone is waiting for you at home. A child, I'd guess, based on the way your face softens whenever you do it. He paused, his expression gentling. And I know that Vincent Greco has been harassing you for some time, and that tonight was simply when it escalated beyond what you could ignore. Emily's blood ran cold. How could you possibly? I'm very good at reading people. It's how I've survived in my world. Dominic's voice dropped, and she caught a flash of something dark in his eyes, old pain, carefully controlled. And I've encountered men like Vincent before. They're predators. They pick their targets carefully, isolate them, make them feel like they have no options. The fact that you're still here, still fighting, tells me everything I need to know about your strength. The sommelier arrived with their wine, and the interruption gave Emily a moment to compose herself. Her hands were shaking as she accepted the glass Dominic poured for her, and she took a sip more to have something to do than out of any desire for alcohol. The wine was extraordinary, rich and complex, nothing like the cheap boxed variety she occasionally treated herself to at home, but she barely tasted it. "Why were you watching me?" she asked finally, needing to understand. "Before Vincent came over, I saw you. You were tracking everyone in the room, but you kept coming back to me. Why?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost reluctant. "Because you reminded me of someone I couldn't save a long time ago." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Emily wanted to ask more, to push past the walls she could sense around this mysterious man, but something in his expression stopped her. Some wounds were too raw to probe, even with good intentions. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for whoever that was." His eyes met hers, and she saw surprise there, as if he hadn't expected empathy from her, as if he was used to people taking without ever thinking to give. "Thank you. But tonight isn't about my past. Tonight is about making sure you're safe." He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Vincent Greco isn't just a handsy customer, Emily. He's connected to people who operate outside the law. The fact that he backed down when he recognized my name suggests he knows better than to cross me. But that protection only works if people believe you're actually mine." Emily's cheeks flushed at the possessive word, even as her mind raced to process what he was saying. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that for the next few weeks, at minimum, you allow me to be seen with you. Dinner, perhaps a charity event or two. Nothing that would compromise your integrity or put you in any position you're uncomfortable with. Simply a visible association that would make Vincent and anyone like him think twice before approaching you again." "And what do you get out of it?" Emily couldn't keep the suspicion from her voice. She had learned long ago that nothing came without strings attached, especially from powerful men. "You don't strike me as someone who does things out of the goodness of his heart." Dominic laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow more human. "You're right to be cautious. In truth, there is something I would gain. I'm expected at several high-profile events over the coming months, and arriving alone has become complicated. My business associates seem determined to introduce me to their daughters, and my own mother has taken to sending me photographs of suitable matches on a weekly basis." He grimaced. Having a companion would provide a welcome buffer against their matchmaking attempts. Despite herself, Emily felt a smile tugging at her lips. "So you're suggesting we use each other? I get protection from Vincent, and you get protection from marriage-minded socialites. When you put it that way, it sounds rather mercenary." His eyes sparkled with humor. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement between two people who understand the value of boundaries. Emily should have said no. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was insane, that she didn't know this man, that pretending to date a billionaire could only end in disaster. But another part of her, the part that had kissed him back with everything she had, the part that had felt truly safe for the first time in years when he stepped between her and Vincent, that part whispered that maybe, just maybe, taking a chance wouldn't destroy her. "I have a daughter," she said, watching his face carefully for any sign of retreat. "She's 4 years old. Her name is Lily. If we do this, whatever this is, she can't be part of it. I won't have her confused or hurt by some arrangement that has an expiration date." Dominic nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than deterred. "That's completely reasonable. I would never expect you to involve your child in our arrangement, though I should tell you—" He hesitated, something flickering in his dark eyes. "I'm actually quite fond of children. My younger sister has twins, and I'm their favorite uncle. Or so they tell me, usually when they want something." The image of this severe, powerful man being wrapped around the fingers of small children was so incongruous that Emily found herself laughing. It felt strange, using muscles in her face that had grown stiff from disuse. When had she last laughed like this? She couldn't remember. "I can't make any promises tonight," she said finally. "I need to think about this. I need to consider all the implications for my daughter and my job and my life." But she reached across the table, surprising both of them by briefly touching his hand. "Thank you for intervening, for the offer, for treating me like a person worth protecting." Dominic turned his hand over, his fingers briefly intertwining with hers before letting go. The contact lasted only seconds, but Emily felt it echo through her entire body. "You are worth protecting, Emily Carter. I hope you'll give me the chance to prove that to you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation and wine and a slowly building connection that Emily hadn't anticipated. Dominic told her about his company, Castellano Industries, a conglomerate with interests in technology, real estate, and renewable energy. But more importantly, he asked about her. He wanted to know about Lily, about her dreams, about the path that had led her to serving tables at La Étoile. And when she talked, he listened with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the room. By the time her hour was up, extended twice by Dominic's insistence, Emily realized she didn't want the evening to end. They stood outside the restaurant, the cool night air, a sharp contrast to the warmth they had built between them, and she felt the moment stretching, pregnant with possibility. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "The babysitter is charging by the hour, and I've already spent more than I should have." Dominic reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a sleek black card. "My private number. Think about what I said, Emily, and please." His expression grew serious. "If Vincent contacts you, if anything happens that makes you feel unsafe, call me immediately. I don't care what time it is." Emily took the card, her fingers brushing against his. "Why do you care so much? You just met me." He studied her for a long moment, and she saw something raw and unguarded flash across his features before his careful control reasserted itself. "Perhaps because I've spent too many years not caring enough. Perhaps because protecting people should never require a reason beyond the simple fact that they need protecting." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so old-fashioned and unexpected that Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Good night, Emily. I very much hope this isn't the last time I see you." She watched him walk away, disappearing into the back of a black luxury car that had materialized seemingly from nowhere. The taillights winked red in the darkness, and then he was gone, leaving Emily standing on the sidewalk with a racing heart and a business card that felt like a grenade in her palm. What had she gotten herself into? The question haunted her during the subway ride home, through the quiet streets of her neighborhood, up the 3 flights of stairs to her cramped apartment. Mrs. Okonkwo, her neighbor and regular babysitter, met her at the door with a knowing smile that suggested she could read the evening's events on Emily's face. "Long night?" the older woman asked, her Nigerian accent warm and familiar. "You could say that." Emily paid her with the tips she had managed to collect before everything went sideways, wincing at how thin the envelope felt. Was Lily okay? An angel, as always. "She drew you a picture. It's on the refrigerator." Mrs. Okonkwo patted Emily's cheek with maternal affection. "You look different tonight, my dear, like someone reminded you that you're still young and alive. Whatever happened, don't be so quick to dismiss it." After her neighbor left, Emily crept into Lily's room and stood watching her daughter sleep. The little girl was curled around her stuffed elephant, her brown curls spread across the pillow like a halo, her rosebud mouth slightly open. She looked so peaceful, so untouched by the worries that consumed her mother's every waking moment. Emily would do anything to keep that innocence intact. She thought about Dominic's offer. A fake relationship with a billionaire, protection from Vincent, stability she hadn't known in years, but also risk, the risk of exposure, of getting too close, of letting someone pass the walls she had so carefully constructed. On the refrigerator, Lily's drawing showed 2 stick figures holding hands. "Mommy and me," Lily had labelled it in her careful preschool letters, but there was a 3rd figure off to the side, taller than the others, with a question mark where the face should be. "Who's that, baby?" Emily whispered to the sleeping child, touching the paper gently. She knew Lily couldn't answer, but the question lingered in her mind anyway. Who was the mysterious 3rd figure in her daughter's imagination? A father Lily had never known? A future that Emily had never dared to envision? Or perhaps someone new? Someone who had appeared out of nowhere and kissed her like she mattered, like she was precious, like she was worth fighting for. Emily went to bed that night with Dominic's card on her nightstand and his taste still lingering on her lips. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would make a rational decision. Tomorrow she would weigh the pros and cons like the responsible mother she was. But tonight, just for tonight, she allowed herself to dream of possibilities she had long ago abandoned. And in those dreams, dark eyes watched over her, keeping her safe from all the Vincents of the world. Little did she know that across Manhattan, in a penthouse that overlooked Central Park, Dominic Castellano stood at his window, unable to sleep, replaying every moment of their encounter. He had come to La Étoile on business, following a lead on Vincent Greco's money laundering operation. Finding Emily had been unexpected. Wanting to protect her had been instinctive, but this pull he felt toward her, this need to see her again that bordered on compulsion, that was something else entirely, something that could complicate everything he was trying to accomplish. Something that might, if he wasn't careful, expose vulnerabilities he had spent a lifetime learning to hide. He thought of her daughter Lily, 4 years old, and counting on a mother who was stretched to the breaking point. He thought of Emily's fierce independence, her reluctance to accept help, her eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. He thought of the woman he hadn't been able to save all those years ago, and felt the old guilt stirring in his chest. This time would be different. This time he had the power and resources to make a difference. This time he wouldn't stand by while someone suffered. But as he finally turned from the window and sought the emptiness of his king-sized bed, Dominic couldn't shake the feeling that Emily Carter was going to be far more than a temporary arrangement. She was going to be the woman who changed everything. 3 days later, Emily found herself standing outside the gleaming glass tower of Castellano Industries, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain the doorman could hear it. She had spent those 3 days in an agonizing cycle of doubt and hope, picking up her phone to call Dominic at least a dozen times before setting it back down. But this morning, Lily had woken up with a fever, and the pediatrician had recommended tests that Emily's insurance wouldn't cover, and the reality of her situation had crashed over her like a cold wave. She needed help. She hated that she needed help, hated the feeling of vulnerability that came with admitting she couldn't do everything alone. But Lily's health was more important than Emily's pride, and if Dominic's offer could provide even a fraction of the stability she desperately needed, she owed it to her daughter to at least explore it. The lobby of Castellano Industries was exactly what she had expected, all polished marble and abstract art, and people in expensive suits moving with purpose. Emily felt acutely aware of her worn sneakers and the second-hand coat she had found at a thrift store 2 winters ago. She didn't belong here. Everything about this space was designed to remind people like her that they were visitors in a world where they would never be permanent residents. "Can I help you?" The receptionist was a beautiful woman with perfect makeup and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked at Emily's clothes with barely concealed disdain, already preparing to redirect her to a service entrance. "I'm here to see Dominic Castellano," Emily said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "He gave me his private number, but I was hoping to speak with him in person." The receptionist's eyebrows rose. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but if you could just tell him that Emily Carter is here. Mr. Castellano is an extremely busy man. He doesn't see anyone without an appointment, and his schedule is booked for the next 3 months. The receptionist's tone had shifted from dismissive to openly hostile. "Perhaps you could leave a message, and someone from his office might get back to you, eventually." Emily's cheeks burned with humiliation. Of course, this had been a mistake. What had she been thinking, showing up unannounced at a billionaire's office like she had any right to be there? She was turning to leave, her eyes stinging with unshed tears, when a familiar voice cut through the lobby's ambient noise. "Emily?" She spun around to find Dominic emerging from a private elevator, his brow furrowed with concern. He was even more striking in daylight, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, his dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. Behind him trailed a small entourage of assistants with tablets and phones, but he brushed past them without a second glance, his entire focus locked on her. "What are you doing here? Is everything all right? Did something happen?" The questions tumbled out rapidly, his hands reaching for her shoulders as if to assure himself she was real and unharmed. "I'm fine," she said quickly, acutely aware of the receptionist's gaping stare and the curious glances from passing employees. I wanted to talk to you about your offer, but clearly you're busy and I should have called first. I'm sorry this was—" "Don't apologize." His voice softened, and she saw the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. "I'm glad you came. I was starting to worry you had decided I was more trouble than I was worth." He turned to address his waiting entourage without releasing her. "Cancel my next meeting. Something important has come up." "But sir, the board presentation can wait. Emily, come with me." He guided her toward the private elevator, his hand warm and steady against her lower back. "We'll talk in my office. It's more private." But the elevator ride was silent, but not uncomfortably so. Emily found herself studying Dominic's reflection in the polished metal doors, trying to reconcile the powerful CEO who commanded an entire building with the man who had kissed her so tenderly in a restaurant 3 days ago. He caught her looking and offered a small smile that made her stomach flutter. His office occupied the entire top floor, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the Manhattan skyline. The furnishings were elegant but understated, a large mahogany desk, leather chairs, built-in bookshelves lined with what looked like actual well-worn books rather than decorative props. It felt more like a study than the ostentatious power display she had expected. Please sit. Dominic gestured to a comfortable-looking couch near the windows. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. Emily perched on the edge of the couch, her hands twisted together in her lap. Now that she was here, she wasn't sure how to begin. Everything she had rehearsed on the subway ride over seemed inadequate. Dominic sat across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched. He leaned forward, his elbows on his thighs, his dark eyes searching her face. Something happened. I can see it in the way you're holding yourself. Tell me. The gentleness in his voice undid her carefully maintained composure. Before she could stop herself, the words came pouring out. Lily's fever, the doctor's recommendations, the insurance company's refusal to cover the tests, the staggering cost that would deplete her meager savings and still leave her short. She told him about Vincent's threatening text message, the one she had received yesterday that made it clear he hadn't forgotten her. She told him about her landlord's warning that rent was due in a week, and she was $300 short. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her cheeks, and she felt stripped bare in a way that terrified her. She hadn't meant to reveal so much, hadn't intended to lay all her vulnerabilities at his feet. But something about Dominic's steady presence made it impossible to maintain her usual walls. "I'm sorry," she whispered, swiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "I didn't come here to dump all my problems on you. I wanted to tell you that I've been thinking about your offer, and if it's still on the table—" "Emily." Dominic's voice was rough, and when she looked up, she saw something fierce burning in his eyes. "Stop apologizing, stop minimizing. You're a mother fighting to protect her child with absolutely no support system. The fact that you've managed as well as you have is nothing short of remarkable." He reached out and took her hands in his thumbs tracing soothing circles across her knuckles. "My offer is absolutely still on the table, but I want to be clear about something. I'm not doing this because I expect anything in return. Your daughter needs medical care, and that's happening regardless of any arrangement between us. I'll have my personal physician see her today, and every test she needs will be covered. End of discussion." Emily shook her head, pulling her hands back. "I can't accept that. It's too much. You barely know me, and I know enough." His jaw tightened with determination. "I know that you work yourself to exhaustion to provide for your daughter. I know that you've been dealing with harassment from a dangerous man and haven't asked anyone for help. I know that you came here today, despite how hard it must have been, because you love your child more than you love your pride." He paused, his expression softening. "And I know that 3 nights ago you kissed me like you meant it. That counts for something in my book." The memory of their kiss hung between them, electric and undeniable. Emily felt her cheeks flush, remembering how completely she had lost herself in that moment, how right it had felt to be in his arms. "The arrangement," she said, desperately trying to steer the conversation back to practical matters. How would it work? Dominic settled back in his chair, adopting a more business-like demeanor that she suspected was for her benefit. "We would be seen together in public, dinners, events, perhaps a few carefully staged photographs. The story would be that we've been seeing each other quietly for a few weeks and are now going public. I have a charity gala next Saturday that would serve as an excellent debut." "And Vincent?" "Once word spreads that you're with me, Vincent won't dare come near you. The Greco family has history with my company. They know better than to create problems for anyone under my protection." A dark edge crept into his voice. "But if he does try anything, I have people who can handle it." Emily nodded slowly, processing. "And in exchange, I accompany you to events so your mother stops sending you pictures of eligible socialites." A genuine laugh escaped him, breaking the tension. "That's the official arrangement, yes, though I should warn you, my mother is formidable. She'll probably love you, which may create its own complications." Before Emily could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door, and a woman entered without waiting for permission. She was tall and elegantly dressed, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, and features that bore a striking resemblance to Dominic's. Her eyes, the same deep brown as his, swept over Emily with an assessing gaze that missed nothing. "Dominic, your assistant said you cancelled the board meeting for something important." The woman's voice was cool, aristocratic. "I assumed it was a crisis. I didn't realize it was a woman. Victoria." Dominic rose, his posture stiffening. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." Clearly, Victoria's gaze hadn't left Emily. "Are you going to introduce us, or shall I guess?" Emily stood, painfully aware of how out of place she must look in this world of designer clothes and power plays. "I'm Emily Carter," she said, extending her hand. "I'm a friend of Dominic's." Victoria's handshake was brief and perfunctory. "A friend? How lovely." The skepticism in her tone was unmistakable. "And what exactly do you do, Emily Carter?" "I'm a waitress at La Étoile." Something flickered in Victoria's expression. Surprise, followed by what might have been contempt. "How interesting. And how long have you and my brother been friends?" So this was Dominic's sister. Emily straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated, despite the cold sweat gathering at the back of her neck. "Not long. We met a few days ago." Days. Victoria's voice could have frozen water. "And in these few days, you've somehow become important enough for my brother to cancel a presentation to the board of directors. A presentation, I might add, that affects the future of our entire company." She turned to Dominic, her composure cracking to reveal genuine anger. "What is going on here, Dom? Mother sent me to check on you because you've been distracted for days, and I find you entertaining some—" "Careful." Dominic's voice dropped to a dangerous register Emily hadn't heard before. "Think very carefully about how you want to finish that sentence, Victoria." The siblings stared at each other, a silent battle of wills playing out in the space between them. Emily felt like an intruder in a family drama she didn't understand, currents of history and resentment flowing beneath the surface. Finally, Victoria looked away. "Fine, but we need to talk. Privately." She gave Emily one last dismissive glance. "I'm sure you can find your own way out." "Actually," Dominic said, his hand moving to rest possessively on Emily's lower back, "Emily will be joining us for dinner this Saturday at the charity gala, as my date." Victoria's eyes widened almost imperceptibly before her mask of composure slipped back into place. "I see. Well, that will certainly give Mother something to talk about." She turned and strode toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "I hope you know what you're doing, brother. The last time you let your heart overrule your head, it nearly destroyed you." With that cryptic warning, she was gone, leaving Emily alone with Dominic and 1,000 new questions swirling through her mind. "I'm sorry about that," Dominic said, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Victoria is protective. Our family has been through some difficult times, and she tends to see threats everywhere." "What did she mean?" Emily asked quietly. "About your heart overruling your head? About the last time?" A shadow passed across Dominic's face, and for a moment he looked older, wearier, haunted by ghosts she couldn't see. "That's a story for another day, one I promise to tell you when the time is right." He took both her hands in his again, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Emily looked into his eyes and saw sincerity there, along with something that looked almost like desperation. Whatever secrets he was carrying, whatever Victoria's warning had meant, in this moment she believed that he genuinely wanted to help her. And with Lily's health on the line, she couldn't afford to let her own suspicions stand in the way. "I trust you," she said, and meant it. So, What happens next? The smile that spread across Dominic's face was worth every doubt she had pushed aside. Next, we get your daughter to a doctor. And then... His eyes sparkled with an anticipation that made her heart race. We prepare you to take on my family. Udis, as he led her back to the elevator, already on his phone arranging for a physician to meet them at her apartment, Emily couldn't shake Victoria's words from her mind. The last time you let your heart overrule your head, it nearly destroyed you. What had happened to Dominic Castellano, who was the woman he hadn't been able to save? And most importantly, was Emily walking into a situation far more complicated than a simple business arrangement? The answers, she knew, would come in time. For now, she had a sick daughter to care for, and a billionaire's sister to impress. The rest of the mystery could wait. But as she caught Dominic watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch, Emily wondered if she was already in too deep to walk away, even if she wanted to. The charity gala was everything Emily had feared, and nothing she could have prepared for. She stood in the marble foyer of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, surrounded by women in gowns that cost more than her annual rent, feeling like a complete fraud, despite the designer dress Dominic had insisted on buying her. The emerald green silk clung to her curves in ways that made her simultaneously self-conscious and strangely powerful, and the delicate diamond pendant around her neck felt like a brand, marking her as an imposter in this world of old money and older scandals. "You're doing beautifully," Dominic murmured in her ear, his hand warm and steady against the small of her back. He had been attentive all evening, never leaving her side, anticipating her needs before she even voiced them. Every time she started to feel overwhelmed, he would lean in with some quiet observation about the other guests that made her laugh, breaking the tension with his unexpected humor. "I feel like everyone is staring at me," she whispered back, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, more for something to do with her hands than any desire to drink. "They are staring at you," he confirmed, but his eyes were warm with admiration rather than judgment. "Because you're the most beautiful woman in the room, and they're all wondering where I've been hiding you." Emily rolled her eyes, but she couldn't suppress the flush of pleasure that spread through her chest. In the week since their meeting at his office, things had moved faster than she could have imagined. Lily's tests had come back clear, just a viral infection that was already resolving, and Dominic's physician had set up an ongoing care plan that covered everything Emily's insurance wouldn't. Her rent had been paid, mysteriously, and when she had confronted Dominic about it, he had simply shrugged and said it was part of their arrangement. But it was the smaller things that had truly caught her off guard. The daily texts asking how Lily was feeling, the care package of toys and books that had arrived for her daughter, carefully selected to match interests Emily had only mentioned once in passing. The way Dominic listened when she talked, really listened, as if her opinions and experiences mattered, even though she was just a waitress from nowhere. She was falling for him. She knew it, and the knowledge terrified her. "Dominic, darling." A woman's voice cut through Emily's thoughts, sharp and clear as a bell. She turned to see a stunning blonde approaching them, her red gown hugging curves that belonged on a runway model, her smile brilliant and predatory. The woman air-kissed Dominic's cheeks with practiced familiarity, her manicured fingers lingering on his arm just a beat too long. "Serena." Dominic's voice was polite but distinctly cool. "I didn't expect to see you here. The children's hospital is one of my pet causes," Serena purred, her eyes sliding to Emily with barely concealed contempt. "And who is this? Your assistant?" "This is Emily Carter," Dominic said, and Emily heard the edge beneath his courteous tone. "My girlfriend." Serena's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose almost to her hairline. "Girlfriend? How unexpected." She extended her hand to Emily, her grip cold and limp like holding a dead fish. "Serena Whitmore. Dominic and I are old friends. very old friends. The emphasis on the word made Emily's stomach clench. There was history here, and not the kind that could be easily dismissed as ancient news. Serena looked at Dominic like she owned him, like Emily was merely a temporary obstacle to be removed. "Emily is a wonderful woman," Dominic said, pulling Emily closer to his side. "I'm lucky to have found her." "Found her where exactly?" Serena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "She doesn't look familiar. I thought I knew everyone in our circle." "Our circle." Emily surprised herself by speaking up, her voice steady despite the churning in her gut. "I didn't realize social circles came with membership requirements. Is there an application process, or do you just inherit the snobbishness?" Serena's eyes widened, and Emily saw something flash there, surprise, perhaps, or a grudging respect. Dominic made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "She has spirit," Serena acknowledged, her tone taking on a calculating quality that made Emily even more uneasy. "I can see why you're intrigued, Dom. You always did have a weakness for projects." Before Dominic could respond, Serena had glided away, disappearing into the crowd with one last, meaningful glance over her shoulder. Emily felt the tension in Dominic's body, the way his jaw had tightened at Serena's final words. "Who was that?" she asked quietly, though she suspected she already knew. Dominic was silent for a long moment, his eyes following Serena's progress across the room. "Someone I used to know," he said finally. "Someone I thought I loved a long time ago. She's not relevant anymore." But the way he said it, with that slight hesitation, that shadow in his eyes, told Emily that Serena was very relevant indeed. Whatever history they shared, it wasn't as ancient as Dominic wanted her to believe. What happened next would only make things worse. Mrs. Helena Castellano descended upon them like a force of nature, her silver hair immaculately styled, her black gown elegant and severe. She was shorter than Emily had expected. Somehow she had imagined Dominic's formidable mother as a towering figure. But what she lacked in height, she made up for in sheer presence. Her dark eyes, so like her son's, swept over Emily with an assessment that missed nothing. "So this is the woman who has my son cancelling board meetings," Helena said, her voice carrying the faint accent of old European aristocracy. "I must say, when Victoria called me, I expected someone more polished." "Mother." Dominic's voice held a warning that Helena seemed entirely immune to. "Don't mother me, Dominic. I have every right to be concerned." Helena stepped closer to Emily, studying her face with an intensity that made Emily want to squirm. "You're pretty enough, I suppose, and you have good posture, that counts for something. But you're also a single mother working as a waitress, with no family connections I can discern and no obvious assets beyond whatever my son sees in you." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You can understand why I might be skeptical of your intentions." Emily's cheeks burned, but she refused to look away from Helena's piercing gaze. "With respect, Mrs. Castellano, I never asked for any of this. Your son approached me. Your son offered this arrangement. If anyone should be skeptical of intentions, it's me. I'm the one with everything to lose." Helena's eyes narrowed, and for a terrible moment Emily thought she had gone too far. But then, unexpectedly, the older woman smiled, a small, grudging expression that transformed her severe features. "Spirit," Helena said, echoing Serena's earlier assessment. "Good. You'll need it if you're going to survive this family." She turned to Dominic, her expression softening slightly. "She may not be what I would have chosen for you, but she has a backbone. That's more than I can say for most of the vapid socialites I've been introducing you to." "Does this mean you approve?" Dominic asked, surprise evident in his voice. "It means I'm willing to observe. The jury is still out." Helena patted Emily's arm with a gesture that was almost maternal. Don't let anyone here intimidate you, dear. Half of them are drowning in debt, and the other half are sleeping with each other's spouses. You may be an outsider, but at least you're honest about it." With that enigmatic pronouncement, Helena swept away toward a cluster of distinguished-looking gentlemen, leaving Emily reeling from the emotional whiplash of the past 10 minutes. "That went better than expected," Dominic said, and when Emily turned to stare at him incredulously, she saw that he was genuinely relieved. "No, really. That's high praise coming from my mother. She once made a diplomat cry at a state dinner." Emily shook her head, caught between laughter and tears. "Your family is insane." "Completely," he agreed cheerfully, "but we're loyal once you've earned our trust, and you, Emily Carter, are well on your way to earning it." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk, with Emily growing more confident as she realized that most of these intimidating socialites were, as Helena had suggested, far less impressive beneath their polished surfaces. By the time the event began winding down, she was actually enjoying herself, buoyed by Dominic's unwavering support and the unexpected warmth of his mother's tentative approval. They were waiting for Dominic's car when it happened. Emily had stepped away to use the restroom and was making her way back through the museum's grand hallway when a hand closed around her wrist, yanking her into a shadowed alcove. Her heart seized with terror as she found herself face to face with Vincent Greco, his expression ugly with barely controlled rage. "Think you're too good for me now?" Vincent hissed, his fingers digging painfully into her skin. "Playing dress-up with the Castellano air? I know what you are, sweetheart. A gold-digging whore who got lucky, and when Dominic gets tired of you, and he will, you'll come crawling back to the real world, to me." Emily tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. Fear clawed at her throat, stealing her voice, transporting her back to that night at L'Étoile, when she'd been so helpless, so alone. But she wasn't alone anymore. Let her go. Dominic's voice cut through the darkness like a blade, cold and deadly. He stood at the entrance to the alcove, his posture deceptively relaxed, but Emily could see the violence coiled in every line of his body. Behind him, 2 large men in dark suits had materialized. Security, she realized, that she hadn't even known were present. Vincent released her wrist, raising his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. "Just having a friendly conversation with an old acquaintance, Castellano. No harm done." "You have 5 seconds to remove yourself from this building," Dominic said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. "After that, my associates will assist you. I promise you won't enjoy the experience." Vincent's face contorted with hatred, but he wasn't stupid enough to challenge Dominic on his own territory. He straightened his jacket, smoothing his expression into something approximating civility. "This isn't over," he said quietly. The words meant only for Emily. "We'll finish our conversation later. Count on it." And then he was gone, escorted firmly toward the exit by Dominic's security team, leaving Emily shaking in the shadowed alcove. Dominic was at her side immediately, his hands gentle on her arms, his dark eyes searching her face for signs of injury. "Did he hurt you? Emily, look at me. Are you all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. The fear was fading now, replaced by a shaky relief, and something else, a fierce gratitude for this man who kept showing up when she needed him most. "I'm going to deal with Vincent Greco," Dominic said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Permanently. He will never bother you again, Emily. I swear it on my life." "How?" she whispered. "He's dangerous, Dominic. He has connections. So do I." His smile was sharp, predatory, nothing like the warmth she had grown accustomed to. "And my connections are better. Trust me." Later that night, in the back of his car as they drove through the glittering Manhattan streets, Dominic finally told her the truth about Serena. "She was my fiancée," he said quietly, staring out the window at the passing lights. 3 years ago, we were engaged for 6 months before I discovered she was only interested in my money. She had been feeding information about Castellano Industries to our competitors, using our relationship to access confidential data. His jaw tightened. When I confronted her, she laughed, said I was naive to think someone could love me for anything other than my bank account. Emily's heart ached at the pain in his voice, the old wound that clearly hadn't fully healed. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That must have been devastating. It taught me to be careful, to protect myself." He turned to look at her, and she saw vulnerability there that he rarely allowed anyone to witness. "But with you, Emily, I don't want to be careful. I want to believe that what I see in your eyes is real. That this connection between us isn't just an arrangement anymore." And the words hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. Emily thought about everything she had learned tonight, about Serena's history with Dominic, about Helena's guarded approval, about Vincent's continued threat. She thought about her daughter, sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Okonkwo's apartment, about the life she had built from nothing, about the walls she had erected to protect herself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. And then she thought about how Dominic made her feel. Seen, valued, safe. How his kiss still lingered on her lips from that first desperate night. How she caught herself smiling at his texts, counting the hours until she could see him again. "It's not just an arrangement for me either," she admitted, the words barely audible over the hum of the engine. "I'm terrified of how much you've come to mean to me, Dominic. I have nothing to offer you, no money, no connections, no fancy education. Just me and Lily and a mountain of baggage." Dominic's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with unshed tears. "You," he said firmly, "are everything, and Lily is a gift. The baggage we'll unpack together." When he kissed her this time, it wasn't desperate or performative. It was soft and slow and full of promises neither of them was ready to speak aloud. Emily melted into him, her hands sliding up to cup his face, memorizing the planes and angles of features that had become as familiar as her own. But even as she lost herself in his embrace, a small part of her whispered warnings she couldn't ignore. Serena's calculating smile, Victoria's cryptic warnings, Vincent's promise that this wasn't over. Something was coming, something that would test everything they were building together. But for tonight, Emily chose to believe in the fairy tale. For tonight, she allowed herself to hope. Little did she know that by this time tomorrow, everything she thought she knew about Dominic Castellano would be shattered, and with it, any illusion that their love story would have a simple, happy ending. The destruction came not with a bang, but with a manila envelope slipped under Emily's apartment door sometime in the early hours of the morning. She found it when she woke, still wearing the emerald dress from the night before, having been too exhausted to change after tumbling into bed at 3 in the morning. Lily was still at Mrs. Okonkwo's. Emily had called ahead to extend the overnight arrangement, and the silence of the empty apartment made the rustle of the envelope seem unnaturally loud. Inside, she found photographs, dozens of them. Dominic with other women, beautiful women, glamorous women, women in expensive clothes and designer jewelry. In some photos he was smiling, in others laughing, his arm around waists, his lips pressed to cheeks. The images spanned years, judging by his changing hairstyles and the evolution of his fashion choices. Written across the back of each photograph, in elegant feminine handwriting, were dates and descriptions. Miami, 2019, Dominic's birthday celebration. Aspen, 2020, holiday retreat. Paris, 2021, Fashion Week. But the worst was the final document in the envelope. A printout of a news article from 2 years ago, the headline screaming in bold letters, "Billionaire Playboy's charitable scheme exposed. Women accuse Castellano of using rescue tactics to seduce vulnerable targets." Emily's hands trembled as she read the article. It detailed allegations from 3 women who claimed Dominic had approached them during difficult periods in their lives. Financial troubles, family crises, professional setbacks, offering help and support that quickly turned romantic. Each woman described a similar pattern: the generous assistance, the gradual intimacy, the intense relationship that burned hot and fast before Dominic inevitably moved on, leaving them with nothing but memories and expensive gifts that felt like payment for services rendered. "He has a savior complex," one woman was quoted as saying. "He gets off on rescuing damaged women. We're projects to him, not people. The moment we start to heal, he loses interest." The words blurred as tears filled Emily's eyes. Was this who Dominic really was? Had everything between them been nothing more than a pattern he had perfected over years of practice? She thought of how they had met, her in danger, him swooping in to save her. She thought of his offer to help with Lily's medical bills, with her rent, with every problem that had seemed so overwhelming. She thought of how he had made her feel special, chosen, worthy of rescue. Had it all been a manipulation? She was still staring at the photographs, paralyzed by shock and grief, when her phone buzzed with a text from Serena Whitmore. "I thought you should know the truth before you got in too deep. He did the same thing to me once." The charming savior act. The overwhelming attention, the promises that felt so real. And then one day I wasn't damaged enough anymore, and he discarded me like last season's fashion. Be careful, Emily. Dominic Castellano collects broken birds. He doesn't actually want them to fly. Emily threw her phone across the room, a sob tearing from her throat. Everything she had allowed herself to believe, every wall she had let him dismantle, every hope she had permitted herself to feel, it had all been built on lies. She was just another in a long line of projects, another vulnerable woman for Dominic to rescue and abandon. She thought of Lily, who had already started asking about Mommy's nice friend, who had accepted the toys and books with innocent delight, who had no idea that the man sending them probably had a storage unit somewhere filled with similar gifts for all the other children of all the other single mothers he had seduced over the years. The anger came then, hot and cleansing, burning through the grief like wildfire through dead brush. Emily had survived Derek's abandonment. She had survived years of struggling as a single mother. She had survived Vincent Greco's threats and the daily indignities of working in a world that looked through her like she was invisible. She would survive Dominic Castellano's betrayal too, but first she was going to confront him. She arrived at Castellano Industries looking nothing like the polished woman who had graced the charity gala the night before. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her clothes the worn jeans and faded sweater of her real life. The same receptionist who had tried to dismiss her before took one look at her expression and paled, immediately reaching for the phone. "Mr. Castellano is in a meeting. Tell him Emily is here," she said, her voice flat and deadly. "Tell him that if he doesn't see me in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to walk out that door and he will never see me again." Whatever the receptionist heard in her tone was enough to override protocol. Within 3 minutes, Emily was in the elevator, clutching the manila envelope like a weapon, her heart hammering with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Dominic was waiting for her when the elevator doors opened, his expression shifting from pleasure to concern as he took in her appearance. "Emily, what's wrong? Has something happened to Lily?" "Lily is fine." She thrust the envelope at his chest, watching his face as he opened it and saw the contents. "Apparently I'm the one who needs to worry about what's happening to me." She watched the color drain from his face as he flipped through the photographs. As he reached the article and read the damning headline, his jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek, but when he looked up, his eyes held something she hadn't expected. Not guilt, exactly, but a terrible, weary resignation. "Emily, this isn't what? Isn't what it looks like?" She laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "Because it looks like I'm just the latest in a long line of broken birds you collect. It looks like everything between us has been a script you've perfected over years of practice. It looks like I've been a complete idiot to believe that someone like you could actually care about someone like me. That's not true." His voice was rough, and she could see his hands shaking as he set the envelope down on his desk. Those photographs, they're being used out of context. Those women were friends, business associates, dates that never went anywhere. And the article. The allegations from 3 women who all describe the exact same pattern. The pattern that fits our relationship perfectly. Emily's voice cracked despite her best efforts to stay strong. "You found me in trouble, Dominic. You swooped in to save me. You overwhelmed me with attention and generosity until I let my guard down. It's exactly what those women described. Me, the article was planted by a competitor trying to damage my reputation. The women who made those allegations were paid to lie. I have documentation proving it." Dominic stepped toward her, his dark eyes pleading. "Emily, please. Yes, I've made mistakes in my past. Yes, I've dated women who were going through difficult times. But what happened with you, meeting you at La Étoile, kissing you to save you from Vincent, that wasn't a calculated move. I wasn't looking for another project. I was trying to do something good. And then..." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "And then I fell for you, really fell for you, in a way I haven't felt since." He stopped, something flickering in his eyes, old pain, fresh and raw. "Since who?" Emily demanded, remembering Victoria's cryptic warning. "Since the woman you couldn't save? Who was she, Dominic? Another of your projects who didn't work out the way you planned?" The words were cruel, designed to wound, and she saw them land like blows. Dominic's face went grey, and for a moment she thought he might actually stagger. "Her name was Sophia," he said quietly, his voice stripped of all its usual confidence. "She was my younger sister's best friend. I met her when she was going through a divorce, struggling to start over. I tried to help her. With money, with connections, with emotional support. I thought I was being a good person." He paused, and Emily saw his throat work as he swallowed. "I didn't realize I was falling in love with her until it was too late. And I didn't realize that her ex-husband was dangerous until..." He closed his eyes. "Until he found out about us. Until he came to her apartment with a gun." The anger drained from Emily's body, replaced by dawning horror. "Dominic, she died because of me." His eyes opened, and she saw the devastation there, the guilt that had been eating at him for years. "Because I was too focused on playing savior to see the real danger. Because I thought my money and influence could protect her, and I was wrong. Her ex-husband killed her and then himself, and I have had to live with that every single day since." Emily's legs gave out, and she sank onto the couch, her head spinning. This was the story Victoria had been hinting at, the tragedy that had nearly destroyed him. The reason he kept everyone at arm's length, the reason he had such rigid control over his emotions. "So yes," Dominic continued, his voice hollow, "I have a pattern. I see people in trouble and I want to help them. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's a savior complex, maybe it's just how I'm wired. But Emily..." He crossed to her, dropping to his knees in front of the couch, his hands reaching for hers. "You have to believe me. What I feel for you is not about rescue. It's not about fixing you or adding another success story to some twisted collection. You are the first person since Sophia who has made me feel like maybe I deserve to be happy, who has made me want to try again." Emily stared at him, her heart in chaos. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it was a physical ache in her chest. But how could she trust anything now? The photographs, the article, Serena's warning. Even if some of it was manipulated, how could she know what was real? "Who sent me that envelope?" she whispered. Dominic's jaw tightened. "I don't know for certain, but I have a guess. Serena has been trying to sabotage my relationships for years. She's never forgiven me for ending things with her, and she sees any woman I'm involved with as competition to be eliminated. She texted me this morning, told me you collected broken birds." "Of course she did." Bitterness crept into his voice. "Serena is the master of strategic warfare. She waited until she could cause maximum damage, right after you'd finally started to let me in. And then she struck." He squeezed her hands, his grip almost painfully tight. "Emily, I know I'm asking a lot. I know the evidence against me looks damning. But I'm begging you, don't make a decision based on lies designed to destroy us. Give me a chance to prove the truth." Emily pulled her hands away, standing abruptly and walking to the windows. The Manhattan skyline stretched before her, glittering and indifferent, a world she didn't belong to and wasn't sure she wanted to join. "I need time," she said finally, not turning around. "I need to think about all of this, without you standing there looking at me like—" She broke off, unable to finish the sentence. "Like what?" "Like I'm your redemption." She finally turned to face him and saw the blow land. "Maybe that's what scares me most, Dominic. Maybe I'm afraid that what you feel for me isn't love. It's an attempt to atone for Sophia, and I can't be that for you. I can't be the woman who fixes your guilt. I have enough of my own burdens without carrying yours too." The silence that followed was devastating. Emily watched something shatter behind Dominic's eyes, watched him rebuild his walls in real time, watched the man she had been falling for retreat behind the mask of the billionaire CEO. "You're right," he said quietly. "You deserve time. You deserve space to figure out what you want without me pressuring you." He stepped back, creating distance between them that felt like a chasm. "I won't contact you. If you're ready to talk, you know how to reach me." Emily nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She walked to the elevator, feeling his eyes on her back the entire way. When the doors opened, she stepped inside and finally allowed herself to look at him one last time. He stood exactly where she had left him, his posture rigid, his face carefully blank. But his hands were trembling at his sides, and in that small tell, she saw the truth of his pain. "Dominic," she said as the doors began to close, "I want to believe you. I want that more than anything, but I don't know if I can." The last thing she saw was his nod of acceptance, his lips forming words she couldn't hear as the doors sealed shut between them. The ride down felt like a descent into grief. Everything she had allowed herself to hope for, the stability, the partnership, the love that had seemed so impossibly within reach, it was all crumbling around her. She didn't know what was true anymore. Didn't know if Dominic was the villain Serena had painted, or the wounded man he had revealed in his confession about Sophia. All she knew was that she needed to hold her daughter, to remind herself of what was real and solid and unquestionably true. Everything else could wait. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. When Emily arrived at Mrs. Okonkwo's apartment to pick up Lily, she found the door ajar and her neighbor unconscious on the floor, blood trickling from a wound on her temple, and her daughter was gone. The next hours were a blur of terror and desperate action. Emily called 911 while trying to revive Mrs. Okonkwo, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the phone. The older woman regained consciousness just as the paramedics arrived, her first words a broken apology. "I'm so sorry, Emily. He had a gun. I couldn't stop him." That confirmed Emily's worst fears. Vincent Greco had taken her daughter. The police arrived, asked questions, took statements. Emily answered numbly, her mind racing through every worst-case scenario she had ever imagined. Her little girl, her precious Lily, in the hands of a monster who had already proven he was willing to hurt women who crossed him. The thought was unbearable, a pain so acute it felt like being torn apart from the inside. And then Dominic was there. She didn't know how he had found out. Later, she would learn that his security team monitored police frequencies for any incidents connected to people in his circle. But suddenly, he was striding through her apartment building's hallway, his face a mask of controlled fury that made the police officers step back instinctively. "Tell me everything," he demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Every detail. Now." "Sir, this is a police matter," one of the officers began. "This is my family." The words came out like a growl, and Emily saw something flash in Dominic's eyes that she had never seen before, not just anger, but a primal protectiveness that stripped away all his careful sophistication. "That little girl is mine to protect, and I will burn this city to the ground if that's what it takes to get her back safely. So either work with me or get out of my way." Emily should have been offended by his presumption. Lily wasn't his to claim, they weren't a real family. But in that moment, all she felt was overwhelming gratitude. For the first time since finding Mrs. Okonkwo on the floor, she felt a flicker of hope. "Vincent took her," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Mrs. Okonkwo said he had a gun, said something about teaching me a lesson." Dominic's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in rapid Italian that Emily couldn't follow. When he hung up, his expression had shifted, still furious, but now with an edge of determination that suggested he had a plan. "My people are already tracking Vincent's known associates and locations. The Greco family has properties throughout the city, warehouses, apartments, a club in Brooklyn." He turned to the police detective who had been interviewing Emily. "I'll share everything we find, but I'm not waiting for warrants and procedures while a 4-year-old girl is in danger." The detective looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Dominic's expression made him reconsider. "We'll coordinate," he said finally. "But Mr. Castellano, if you do anything to compromise this investigation or put that child at risk—" "The only one at risk," Dominic said quietly, "is Vincent Greco, and that's a promise." The next 4 hours were the longest of Emily's life. She sat in her apartment, surrounded by police officers and Dominic's security team, waiting for news, while her imagination tortured her with possibilities too horrible to contemplate. Dominic was everywhere, on the phone, conferring with his people, coordinating with law enforcement, a whirlwind of activity that somehow never felt chaotic because he moved with such absolute purpose. And then, just as Emily was beginning to lose hope, Dominic's phone rang. She watched his face as he listened, saw his eyes close briefly, saw his shoulders sag with something that looked like relief. "We found her," he said, and Emily's legs gave out beneath her. "One of Vincent's warehouses in Brooklyn. My team is on site. She's scared, but she's unharmed." Emily was sobbing before she could stop herself, great wrenching sounds that came from somewhere deep in her chest. Dominic was beside her in an instant, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her against his chest, while she fell apart. "She's okay," he kept saying, his voice rough with emotion. "She's safe now. I've got you. I've got both of you." The police made the official arrest. Vincent Greco was taken into custody, along with 2 of his associates, but it was Dominic's security team who had located the warehouse, Dominic's connections who had provided the intelligence that led them there. When they finally brought Lily home, the little girl ran straight to Emily with a cry of "Mommy!" that shattered what remained of Emily's composure. She held her daughter for what felt like hours, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body, reassuring herself over and over that this was real, that Lily was safe, that the nightmare was over. But it wasn't until later, after Lily had finally fallen asleep in Emily's bed, refusing to let go of her mother's hand, even in her dreams, that Emily found Dominic sitting alone in her living room, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Dominic?" She approached him carefully, not sure what she would find. When he looked up, his face was ravaged, tear tracks cutting through the careful composure he usually maintained, his dark eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have protected her sooner. I should have dealt with Vincent permanently instead of just warning him off. If anything had happened to her, but nothing did." Emily sat beside him, taking his hands in hers. "She's safe because of you. We're safe because of you." "I almost lost you both." His grip tightened on her hands. "This morning, when you walked away, I understood. I deserved it. Everything Serena sent you, even if it was manipulated, it contained enough truth to make you doubt me. I have made mistakes. I have hurt people with my savior complex, even when I thought I was helping." He paused, struggling for words. "But Emily, today, when I got the call that Lily was missing, I realized something I should have understood much sooner." "What?" "I don't want to save you." He met her eyes, and she saw raw honesty there, more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "I want to be with you. There's a difference. Saving someone means fixing their problems and moving on. Being with someone means standing beside them through the problems and beyond, building something together, growing together." He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Emily Carter. Not because you needed rescuing, but because you rescued me. You made me believe I could be more than my mistakes, that I could have a family again." Emily's eyes filled with tears, different tears now, tears of hope instead of fear. She thought about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. The chaos and the confusion, yes, the pain of Serena's manipulation and the terror of Lily's kidnapping, but also the connection she had felt with Dominic from the very beginning. The way he made her laugh, the way he looked at her like she was precious, the way he had moved heaven and earth to bring her daughter home safely. "The photographs," she said quietly. "The article, Serena's accusations. I can show you documentation disproving all of it. Bank records showing the women who made accusations were paid off by a business rival. Statements from the women in those photographs confirming they were friends or colleagues, nothing more." His expression was earnest. "I'm not a saint, Emily. I've made mistakes in my past, but I have never used women as projects. Today, I have never seduced someone just because they were vulnerable. And I would never, ever treat you or Lily as anything less than the treasures you are." Emily believed him. She wasn't sure when the shift had happened, wasn't sure if it was the desperate hours of searching for Lily or the raw emotion she saw in his face now. But somewhere along the way, her doubts had dissolved, replaced by a certainty that felt as solid as bedrock. "I love you too," she said, and watched his face transform with a joy that took her breath away. "God help me. I've been falling for you since you kissed me in that restaurant. I just didn't want to admit it because it seemed impossible. Because people like you don't end up with people like me. People like me." Dominic pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. "You mean broken people who have spent years building walls because they're terrified of being hurt again? People who have convinced themselves they don't deserve happiness?" He smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "I think people like us are exactly who should end up together. We understand each other." When he kissed her, It was nothing like their first desperate kiss in the restaurant, and nothing like the tender kisses they had shared in his car. This kiss was a promise, slow and deep and full of the future they were choosing together. Emily melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart so full it ached. "There's something else," Dominic said when they finally broke apart. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other for weeks, but I also know that I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Emily's heart stopped as he opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, not ostentatiously large, but elegant and perfect, clearly chosen with care. "I'm not asking you to marry me today," he said quickly, seeing her expression. "I'm asking you to consider it, to wear this ring as a promise that we're in this together, that we're building towards something real, a family, a life, the kind of happiness neither of us thought we deserved." "And Lily?" Emily whispered, her eyes fixed on the ring. "Lily is already part of this. I want to be there for her, not to replace anyone, but to be another person who loves her unconditionally. I want to take her to the park and help her with homework and chase away monsters from under her bed." His voice cracked. "I want to be her family, Emily, yours and hers, if you'll let me." Emily looked at the ring, at this man who had turned her life upside down in the best possible way, at the future stretching out before her, bright with possibility instead of shadowed by fear. She thought about all the years she had spent alone, convinced that she didn't need anyone, that hoping for more would only lead to disappointment. But Dominic wasn't a disappointment. He was messy and complicated and haunted by his past, just like she was. And somehow, together, they were more than the sum of their broken parts. "Yes," she said, watching his face light up like the sun emerging from behind clouds. "Yes to the ring. Yes to building something together. Yes to letting you be part of our family." Dominic slid the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then pulled her into an embrace so fierce it drove the breath from her lungs. Emily felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. How many times had she cried today? But these were tears of pure, uncomplicated joy. "I should warn you," she murmured against his chest. "I'm still a waitress with no connections and a mountain of student debt. Your mother might not approve of this upgrade in our relationship." Dominic laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Actually, I called my mother from the warehouse. Told her what happened, told her how I felt about you." He pulled back to meet her eyes, his expression soft with wonder. "She said, and I quote, 'It's about time you found a woman with backbone. If she can survive this family, she can survive anything. I believe that's the closest thing to approval you'll get." Emily smiled through her tears. "And Victoria?" "Victoria sent me a text an hour ago. It just said, 'I was wrong. Don't let this one get away.'" He shook his head in amusement. "I think you've officially been accepted into the Castellano clan." "What about Serena?" Dominic's expression hardened. "Serena is being dealt with. The evidence package she sent you, I've traced it back to her. Combined with her history of corporate espionage, she's facing serious legal consequences. She won't be bothering us again." Emily nodded, filing that away. She didn't want to think about Serena tonight. Didn't want to think about Vincent or the terror of those hours when Lily was missing or any of the darkness that had almost destroyed what they were building. Tonight, she just wanted to be here, in Dominic's arms, with her daughter safe in the next room and a diamond ring on her finger that represented everything she had never dared to hope for. "Stay tonight," she said quietly. "Lily will be so happy to see you when she wakes up. She's been asking about Mommy's nice friend." "Mommy's nice friend?" Dominic's eyes crinkled with warmth. "I think I can work with that title, for now." They moved to the bedroom, where Lily was still sleeping, her small hand stretched out as if reaching for someone. Emily climbed into the bed carefully, not wanting to wake her, and felt Dominic settle on her other side. For a long moment, they just lay there in the darkness, listening to Lily's soft breathing, feeling the warmth of each other's presence. "This is real," Dominic murmured, his arm draped over both of them protectively. "This is actually happening." "It's real," Emily confirmed, reaching across Lily's sleeping form to intertwine her fingers with his. "We're real." The next morning, Lily woke to find both of them there, and her shriek of delight, "Mommy's friend stayed for a sleepover," echoed through the apartment with the pure joy that only a child can possess. Emily watched Dominic scoop her daughter into his arms, watched Lily giggle as he pretended to be a monster, watched the two of them together, and felt her heart expand until it seemed too large for her chest. This was her family now. Broken in places, scarred by the past, but healing. Together. 1 month later, Emily stood in the doorway of their new apartment, a penthouse that Dominic had insisted on, but that she had decorated with warmth rather than cold luxury. Watching as Lily showed her grandmother Helena her impressive collection of drawings. "This is Mommy," Lily explained seriously, pointing to a stick figure, "and this is Dominic. He's going to be my new daddy. And this is you, Grandma Helena. You have a crown, because Mommy says you're like a queen." Helena, who had arrived 20 minutes ago with the express purpose of inspecting her future daughter-in-law's domestic arrangements, actually laughed, a full, genuine sound that Emily had never heard from her before. "A queen," Helena repeated, her eyes meeting Emily's with something that might have been respect. "I rather like that." Dominic appeared behind Emily, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Mother's smiling," he observed in a low voice. "Should I be worried?" "She and Lily have formed an alliance," Emily whispered back. "I'm not sure if that's terrifying or adorable. Both. Definitely both." Victoria arrived shortly after, bearing wine and what she claimed was an olive branch. An actual olive branch, complete with a ribbon, because Victoria had a flair for the dramatic. "I was wrong about you," she said to Emily, with the air of someone who rarely admitted such things. "You're good for him. You make him human again." Emily thought about the man Dominic had been when they met, controlled, guarded, carrying the weight of Sophia's death like chains around his heart. And she thought about the man he was becoming, still protective, still intense but open now, vulnerable in the ways that mattered, willing to love again even though love had nearly destroyed him. "He does the same for me," Emily said quietly. The engagement party happened 2 months after that, a smaller affair than Helena had initially wanted, but Dominic had put his foot down. "Emily's family now," he had said firmly, "and family means respecting each other's comfort levels." The guest list included Mrs. Okonkwo, fully recovered and thrilled to be there, Emily's few close friends from work, and Dominic's immediate family and closest business associates. No photographers, no press, no society page coverage, just the people who mattered, gathered to celebrate something real. During the party, Emily slipped away to the terrace, needing a moment to breathe. The Manhattan skyline sparkled before her, the same view that had seemed so intimidating when she first entered Dominic's office all those weeks ago. Now it felt like home. Running away? She turned to find Dominic behind her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered her one, then joined her at the railing. "Just taking it all in," she said. "A few months ago I was a single mother, barely making rent, terrified of a man who wanted to hurt me. Now I'm engaged to a billionaire, living in a penthouse, and planning a future I never thought I'd have." She shook her head. "It feels like a fairy tale." "Fairy tales usually involve more dragons and fewer corporate board meetings," Dominic observed, "though my mother might qualify as a dragon in certain moods." Emily laughed, leaning into him. "Your mother has been nothing but kind to me since Lily decided to adopt her. That's because Lily has her wrapped around her tiny finger. It's actually quite impressive." He set down his champagne and turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Emily, I need you to know something. This fairy tale, it's real because you chose it. You could have walked away a dozen times. When Serena tried to poison you against me, when you found out about Sophia, when the world seemed determined to keep us apart." His dark eyes searched her face. "You stayed. You fought. That's not a fairy tale. That's a choice. And it's the bravest thing anyone has ever done for me." Emily's eyes stung with tears, happy tears. She had come to learn the difference. "You saved my daughter. You protected us when we had no one. You showed me what it means to be loved, not in spite of my past, but including it." "We saved each other," Dominic corrected. "That's what real love is, I think. Two broken people who help each other heal, who choose each other every day, even when it's hard." He kissed her then, soft and slow, a promise renewed. Behind them, through the penthouse windows, Emily could hear Lily's laughter mixing with Helena's rare chuckle, could see Victoria actually dancing with Mrs. Okonkwo, while the other guests looked on in amazement. This was her life now, complicated and messy and full of people who had started as strangers and become family. A life that had started with a desperate kiss in a restaurant and had grown into something she couldn't have imagined. When they walked back inside, hand in hand, Emily caught a glimpse of their reflection in the glass, a woman in a simple blue dress and a man in a tailored suit, both of them smiling like they had discovered a secret the rest of the world didn't know. And maybe they had. Maybe the secret was that happy endings weren't given, they were built. Day by day, choice by choice, one act of trust and forgiveness at a time. Maybe the secret was that broken people could find each other and create something beautiful from the pieces. Or maybe the secret was simpler than that. Maybe it was just love. Dominic squeezed her hand, and Emily looked up at him. This complicated, wounded, fiercely protective man who had changed everything. "Ready?" he asked. She thought about all the challenges still ahead of them, the adjustments Lily would need to make, the social pressures they would face as an unlikely couple, the ghosts of the past that would probably never fully disappear. But she also thought about the strength of his hand in hers, the warmth of his smile, the home they were building together. "Ready," she said, and together they walked into their future.